it was like on a sort of slow burn thing where, people in disc golf community, like you see, oh, this tournament, like, oh, like there was actually one person, they were in their 50s, they're actually from Netherlands. Not only were they winning age tournaments, but they actually joined the board of directors of the governing body of U.S. professional disc golf. And this is not an uncommon phenomenon. Like, we dudes are good at taking over organizations when we're
Really
motivated, right?
good. Yeah.
Super good. Uh, and again, this person following the rules, but like, once you're on the board of directors, then it becomes difficult. Then it becomes more personal because if then they set rules that are restrictive in regard to trans people, well, there's a trans person on the board and we're not being inclusive. But then where the rubber really hit the road was the highest elite level female tournaments. There was a biologically male player who started winning them. And what's interesting is as soon as that happened, things moved very quickly, and disc golf actually set what I think is a really good rule. They said, at lower levels, sure, go nuts, but at higher levels, pretty much if you've gone through male puberty, you're not going to play disc golf. And
Huh.
actually,
That's impressive.
it was impressive, and it's not what people expected because, again, it's sort of this sort of like, touchy feely sport, like kind of like ultimate frisbee or snowboarding, where it's like you expected they wouldn't be hard ass about it, but they were, and I was really surprised. You know what the key was, and I'd love to see this done in every organization, is they sent out an anonymous survey to all their members, to tens of thousands of people, and it was anonymously. It wasn't like who in this room wants to deny
Just
trans
stand
people.
up
Yeah,
in
yeah,
front of
yeah,
everyone
yeah, and it's
and
like, yeah, and
explain how transphobic they are
yeah,
and maybe get fired.
and I'd stand up and you'd stand up, and I know you would because I was at Laurier or outside of Laurier when you came there a couple of years ago, and to your credit, you've gone on speaking tours and you've been that person in the room, but not everybody wants to be that person in the room, and I interviewed female disc golfers, like some of the greatest female disc golfers in the world, and they said, you say, well, why don't you speak out? And they said, look, John, let's say I speak out and nothing happens. A week after that, I could be on a disc golf course in a quartet because it's like regular golf. There's like four of you, and one of them could be a trans woman, and it's awkward. It's like, well, I've been campaigning to have you not here, and I get that.
Right.
Like, mobilization is difficult because unless you have the numbers to make it work, then you become the Karen, you become the problem. And so what happened was a really interesting social dynamic. They sent out tens of thousands of people. I actually got the questionnaire too because I'm a member of the PDGA. It's a worldwide organization, and it said, what level of disc golf are you? Are you male or female? Where do you live? And do you think biological males should be included in these categories? And then they published the results. And it was really interesting because most women did not want biological men in their division. But you saw that the better the women are, like going up to the elite level, it was like 80% of the women said, I don't want biological men in here. Like keep them out.
This
And
is sorry.
but I'm just saying this was an eye opener for me
Yeah.
because who would have thought this sport would be like established best practices for canvassing the opinions of people?
Yeah.
Because again, that's not usually the way it works. Usually the way it works is like, well, we had our general meeting and like, well, transphobes come up and grab the microphone. Oh, no one's giving a speech. I guess everyone loves the status quo. And what's interesting, I keep prattling on about this, but I think it's really interesting. In my interview, and I put it in the article because my article preceded I think my article might have had something to do with this. These women, elite female athletes, says we believe 80% of our peers don't want biological males competing at the elite levels. Sure enough, the survey came out. The survey data came out. It was 81%.
Huh.
So their estimate was correct, and yet they told me that if this was done publicly, only two or three of them would speak out.
Yeah.
But but if
Okay.
yeah,
I mean, I was just gonna say this is really interesting.
yeah,
because a lot of people blame women for the trans phenomenon because they say, well, women went along with this, women supported this, women are so stupid to have let this happen to themselves. This is screwing women, but women did it to themselves. And they said trans women are women and yada yada yada. And I mean, and I've thought about, because there are a lot of women that have gone along with this. That's true in some ways. And, like I tend to think that has to do with socialization. Some might argue it has to do with women's, what something innate in women that they're more inclined to get along and not cause conflict and be polite and all of those things. But it does go to show that a lot of women are saying this, but they don't necessarily want it, and that they definitely don't believe it.
I think I don't like to make generalizations about men and women um,
Because we're all exactly the same.
yes,
There's
because
no difference
there were
between
no
us.
different. Yeah, it just um,
And so how could you ever know that there was any difference between a
yeah,
man and a woman?
yeah.
Can't make
No, that's
generalizations.
absolutely not the reason. So, well, I mean, the one reason is because for me it's kind of complicated. So I live in a household of females. So I'm married um, to a she, her, and I have three girls. And it's a very educational experience because when I talk to people my age who have like three boys, their experience as parents, I mean, it isn't better or worse. It's just completely different. Um, and I do notice that um, I have observed that um, men and boys are more likely to be kind of shit disturbers
Hmm.
and say things that are like, well, I don't agree. I think maybe certainly at the age of students and athletes, because a lot of the phenomena we're talking about are collegiate phenomena, like, university sports, or most athletes are young, they're in their 20s. I would say I've noticed that maybe women are a little bit more likely to endorse what I would call the 50% plus one consensus. So if like 55% of the people in the room are like voting one way, maybe they're more motivated than the man, because the man might think, well, I can attract attention to myself and become this like, uh, firebrand rebel type dude if I just like buck the trend and go my own way. That impulse, for whatever reason, socialization or genetics, is more blunted in women. And so I have talked about this kind of stuff with you know people in my family, and it's interesting because often they will say, this is my wider circle of female friends and family members. They'll say, well, of course it's ridiculous to have a biological male weightlifting.
Hmm.
Like that makes no sense, and they recognize it. But then if at their school they have a a trans person come in for like one of the 17 holidays devoted to trans people to give an inspirational speech, they will be there and they'll be clapping and they'll be inspired by it because they're in a room full of people who are also clapping and say they're inspired by it. Like they join in the kind of rituals of affirmation that are part of the cult of inclusion.
Hmm.
And so